Hi, Sissy.
Hi, peeps.
Hey, welcome to LaunchLeft podcast.
Welcome. Thank you. Thanks for welcoming me.
What's your name?
I'm Summer Phoenix.
I'm Rain Phoenix. That's cool. Welcome to the show, a space for famed creatives to launch the next wave of music rebels, also an intentional space that highlights and empowers all artists for whom radical creativity is not a choice, but a necessity. We are so happy to be with you today. We have a very special guest, an iconic artist, somebody who has not only made fun, badass music, but also changed culture in the short time he has been on the planet, and he's got many more years. Mr. Mark Mothersbaugh of Devo fame is our famed creative today, and he's launching his artist Ward White. So we hope you'll sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight.
It's so fun. It's so good. He's such an incredible person, and it was just an absolute joy to get to sit down with him and listen to him and also watch him and just be in his presence was just amazing.
Yeah, and his space. We went to Mutato, which is his actual space where he does all his scoring and all his music, and so
like a museum. So if you watch
instruments, and if you watch YouTube, you can watch some of that because we went there and filmed the whole thing. So follow us everywhere at LaunchLeft, and don't forget to rate and subscribe.
And thank you.
Thank you.
I'm really bad with timelines, names, and all sorts of specific things. It's kind of like a mental version of myopia, I guess. But we're here because of this guy right here, Ward White. I heard his music a number of years ago, and I just became interested in him and just kind of kept an eye on things. And it just happened that recently he played a new album for me, and I was struck by it. You know, it's like, I'm in a business where I get sent tapes all the time from people, and I dodge them because you can't listen to everybody's music. You know, you just become oversaturated, and it fills your head with clutter in a way. You know, at a certain point, if you're trying to like write something for something, and then you're hearing like 10 new concepts that day, it kind of gets in your way. But this guy's music, when I heard this album, and I heard it through this speaker that was like this big. It was like this little crappy.
It was the cat. It was a
cat,
little cartoon cat.
Plastic cat or something, yeah, that my daughter had, and you know, it's like nowadays, now that technology is so amazing, it's like at my house, for instance, we're like less capable of playing music than we were back in the old days when it was just, you had a tape player and you had a turntable.
I did. We had that struggle trying to find a way to actually listen to music in your house.
But on a cat, on a little plastic cat, I love this album, and what I was really struck by in particular is that through that cat, actually it kind of tested out, you know, on other speaker systems too. I really liked it that Ward had this kind of reinvention of a David Bowie kind of sound to his voice that really struck me, you know, and I hadn't heard anybody singing like that in a long time, and it made me really get curious about everything. So I just started listening to a lot of his music.
Right on. And Ward White, what is the name of that record that he's talking about?
This record is called Diminish.
Uh-huh.
And that's now out, I want to say November.
It's called a soft release where it's happening.
Yeah.
Building.
Exactly.
We're still in the process of it.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's how I like to think about it too.
It's kind of it's a slow
growing
build.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
If nobody's heard it, it's brand new.
Exactly.
You know, that's
Brand
the
new to
idea.
you.
So you could.
Did you play with your vocal range throughout, because I noticed that too. There's some high stuff in there, and was that something that you were intentionally doing, or is that something that was always in you in all of your music?
It's, I came to it over time, I think. Initially, when I started singing, it was really more baritone range. As I started making records and layering vocals, when you're doing harmonies with yourself, which is something that I've always loved to do, you push yourself to do all the parts. So as you get into higher and higher parts, I actually had a few people say to me, it's like, your singing's okay down here, but something about when you get up into this higher range, it just has a better feel to it. It just has something. And so sometimes you have to sing for a long time to really learn what your natural range is. I think just ultimately I'm a high tenor, and interestingly don't have much of a lower range. So as I sort of embraced that and realized, I guess I'll just keep going up and see what happens. It started to feel more comfortable to work up there, and I think it is the natural range for me. So it's not really, I don't really even think of it as falsetto so much because it's not pushed to that degree. And often I really don't have a very good falsetto at all. Usually baritones have the best real piercing falsetto. It's this almost like what they call flipping the voice, So yeah, it just feels natural to me.
Which is funny because it's actually quite surprising when you hear it and really delightful.
Oh, thank you.
Seriously, and I agree. It was just like, what? Where did this come from? Because you don't start there, but you get there, and it's surprising.
Yeah, it's. Thank you for that. I do enjoy being able to push that stuff, and I know sometimes it can be sometimes it's strange to folks. So hearing it doesn't quite match up with what they're expecting, but the singers that I've always loved, had that ability to go to those stratospheric places sometimes. I mean, I love Bowie, obviously, but Sparks records and just ELO records with the layering of the vocals. It just seemed very natural to me to go to those high places, and I adore Roy Orbison, who was the master of getting from north to south in a minute and a half.
So the next record's called Harmonizing with Myself.
Harmonizing with Myself. Well, that's actually my self-help book. It's Harmonizing with Myself. Be on the cover like this.
Do you play all the instruments, or do you have a band that plays with you? I mean, how did you make the record?
I do all the vocals and play the guitars on it. On previous records, I've also played the bass. But I always work with drummers and keyboardists as well. So on this record, a drummer named Mark Stepro played with me, who's a fantastic musician who I met maybe 10 years ago in New York, and we did a record then. And he came to LA maybe 5 years ago, and I reconnected with him when we came out. And I said, hey, I don't know anybody here. I spent my whole life in New York. I want to make this record, you're on it, tell me who I should work with. And initially he set me up with a guy named Tyler Chester. We made a record the year before this one called As Consolation. And then on this record, an engineer and bass player named John Spiker, who his primary gig is with Tenacious D. So that's been, so he's been working with them and engineering and producing stuff for them for years. And he plays bass with them when they do the touring as well.
Which brings me to a question that I've been wanting to ask, honestly, both of you. But how much does comedy or humor play a role in your songwriting?
To me, it's a huge component. One of the things that I often find will keep me from being able to really engage with an artist is if they absolutely, at the end of the day, don't have a goddamn sense of humor about themselves. Yeah. And you can tell who does and who doesn't. And there's just, ultimately, that's just where it gets tiring, because I don't really see any daylight between different forms of writing. And if you're really going to write in a way that is personal or is honest about anything in life, you have to be able to include all of the elements that come into it. So, just because I'm writing a sad song, it doesn't mean that you can't. I mean, there's humor in everything. I that kind of dark humor is how I get along. So, it's like people making jokes at a funeral. You have to. It's not, everyone's not, it's, you can't just be weeping the whole time because misery is boring.
So was it hard for you two to become friends because Mark has zero humor and zero dark comedy in his life?
I do find, sometimes it's just over and it's like, all right, I'll try to dumb it down, Mark.
Yeah, it's this guy, I really like him because he seems like a poet to me. That's what I like about his songs. They seem like poetry, and he's telling stories in a really interesting fashion. And yeah, he's got a good kind of self-deprecating sense of humor about him, just in his deliveries all the time, and I appreciate that from people. Because angry young men, like 16, 17-year-olds, you can kind of put up with that a little bit because they're just in shock at finding out that things aren't the way they should be or the way you would want them to be. But angry old men get boring, so I like people with a sense of humor.
Yeah.
You're not angry, but you're old.
Yeah.
Basically.
Well, I applied.
He's older than 17.
I applied for the
I was
Angry
using
Young Men job,
17
and they
as
said I just wasn't in the bracket. I didn't fly at all. So,
Okay.
yeah. I think the demarcation line is somewhere at 20. So
No, so I've just made it.
yeah, you just made it.
Just made it.
What does that say about us? He didn't say older women, so I think we're okay still. Maybe are we exempt?
Well, you two are eternally youthful. I can tell already. I think
Whoa, let's
you're,
make
you're
sure to
lucky.
zoom
You
in
guys
on
have
that.
the right.
Yeah.
Zoom in on that camera.
So that's one of the chapters right there. This chapter.
Exactly.
Eternally youthful.
Yeah, exactly. So I know Bowie came up a few times, and I
will.
remember earlier today, before we were on camera, you were sharing with me a little story about Mark and Bowie early years.
Yeah. Well, as I understand it, Devo were making the trek from Akron to play Max's Kansas City fairly regularly, which was, it was upstairs at Max's, right? Was the room.
Fairly regularly. I think it added up to like 3 or 4 shows over the summer of '77 and just into '78. That's about it.
Right. But
that's still
yeah.
pretty regular if you had nothing else you were doing in your life.
Well, and then
And you were coming from Akron.
Right. We're coming back next week.
and then for the guys who played those, as you say, 3 or 4 shows, to say at one of those shows you were introduced by David Bowie
Oh, that wrinkle.
is, because I played a lot of places 3 or 4 times and I don't ever recall him showing up.
Yeah, that was.
I might have been in the toilet, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure he wasn't there.
How did that happen?
Well, we played in summer of '77 at Max's Kansas City, and we didn't think we were a rock band, to be honest with you. That was not our intention. We thought we were agitprop. We thought we were an art movement. We were Art Devo. That's what we wanted to be. And so we thought, we're going to make films. We're going to have our own. What did they call the 4th channel? UHF or VHF? Remember there used to be like ABC, NBC, CBS, and then there was a 4th
Like
channel.
VHF
an access?
and UHF.
Yeah, an access
Well, it was
cable.
channels,
Before there was cable.
Right.
Channel Z in New York when
So,
it was
yeah,
early
so-
public access there.
So even before that, there was just like always one public access channel that had all the odd stuff on it. And we thought we're going to get our own access channel, the de-evolution channel. We're going to re-educate America, about mutation, not stagnation, and that man is not the center of the universe. We're actually the insane species that is destroying our planet and all the other
So a
species.
psychic channel.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, among other things, yeah. And maybe there'd be an aerobics class too. But anyhow,
The de-aerobics
so we came out and we
class.
played, but we played a show, and after the show we got interviewed, and somebody interviewed us for some local New York magazine. They said, "Who would you like to have produce you guys if you ever got a record deal?" And I go, "Brian Eno and David Bowie." And I had reasons for both of them because they were my two favorite artists. And so when you know it, we came back a couple weeks later, and Brian Eno showed up with Robert Fripp, and he said, "Yeah, I want to work with you guys." We go, "Well, we don't have a record deal." He goes, "We won't worry about that."
Wow.
So then a week after we played that show, it's like he told David Bowie, because I had said in this article that I wanted them to produce us, and he showed up, and he came and watched. And when you played at Max's in those days, you played an opening set, and then the other band went on, Teenage Jesus or whoever it was.
Teenage Jesus and the Jerks.
Yeah, they probably were on that night. The other band, or what was the two-guy band? Marty.
Suicide?
Suicide, yeah, or else it was Suicide. One of those bands would be the band that we'd swap off with. And then after our first set, David Bowie came backstage and he said, "Hey, I heard you guys wanted me to work with you." And we said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, let's go to Germany." No, he said, "Let's go to Japan."
Yeah,
He said,
right.
"Let's go to Japan." He said, "The only thing that could throw it off is I might get to be in this movie in Germany." And so, called Gigolo or something. And so we said, "We're going to be sleeping in a van tonight, so whatever you come up with works
So we'll
for
get
us."
back to you.
And yeah, so when our second set started, he came out on stage and introduced us and called us Devo or something like that. Ironically, and nobody knows this yet, matter of fact, this will be the first that Brian Eno finds out about it, is Brian Eno's roommate at the time was the guy who started the Mug Club. I don't remember names, I already warned you about that. So this guy showed up the same night that David Bowie showed up, and Max's has a stage about this tall, and they were sitting right there. They had two guys sitting there with 16 millimeter cameras, and they shot the show, parts of it, because they had like 4-minute reels of film or whatever a reel of 16 millimeter film was, and they shot these films and they'd be changing them. So between the two of them, they got like about 30 minutes of the show. But they do have David Bowie introducing the band, and somebody found all these rusted reels of film about 3 years ago in New Jersey at a garage sale. Some kid bought this whole stack of reels, and he's looking at them, and he's like, "This looks like Brian Eno doing something." And I haven't looked at the Brian Eno ones yet, but we're transferring them now. But we transferred the Devo ones, and we got like about 30 minutes worth of footage. And then we found an audio tape that matches up with it, so it has David Bowie doing the intro and stuff. So something will happen with that. I don't know what yet, but
Yeah, maybe it'll be on LaunchLeft on this segment.
that could be
You
it.
could do
You
like
could be
5 minutes of the, so
You
we
guys
could cut
could,
it in with this interview.
premiere it.
Seems legit, right?
Dump most of my content anyway. Put that in there. That's better. I'd watch that.
I have a question though about 2 sets, because that's so not the normal like rock band thing anymore, right?
anymore,
It's a jazz, but like you hear about it in jazz more, that you did 2 sets of music, Devo. So you had like one set
We
and
did
then
2 shows, yeah.
and other bands were between you, and did
There
you
was another
replay
band,
the
yeah,
same
we saw.
songs?
Oh, I don't remember. I know we started both sets the same. I think. I can't remember. We did. I've done thousands of shows. I can't remember.
Well, REM would
exactly,
do
but
that too.
But we were known as the band. People would say, who saw the first or second show, they go, "Okay, so this Bantam, Ohio comes out. They put up a screen and they show a film of themselves playing songs. And then they take it down, and then they come out and play the songs." So that's what people were saying about us back in those days.
I think repeating is a great thing, though, for an audience that may have either missed it or heard, and then you come back on and they're able to digest it. And I know that REM's manager once told, like when they were first starting out, always they would play the song that was the most catchy twice in the set.
Yeah, right.
They'd play it at the beginning and at the end.
We didn't
and that
have anything
became
that
like
was
the
catchy, but we had a
I
lot
think
of
all
music,
your
so
songs
we
are
probably did.
catchy. I beg to differ.
We had a lot of music, so we probably played 2 totally different sets. But that night, you know, him and Eno, they basically said, we said, well, we don't have a record deal. We can't do it. And they go, we'll pay for it. And they were our patrons and flew us to Germany and recorded a record with us. And that's how it started.
You did
And
that
that's how it should be.
And then I loved, but I got to say, it's like hearing Ward's latest album. It just made me think of David, because last year was a big year, you know, in the world of David Bowie anyhow. And that probably made me fonder for his music, even just that connection.
And are you like an avid fan of Bowie?
Oh yeah, yeah. He's, you know, my whole life, you know, bordering on obsession.
Mm-hmm.
He was certainly, you know, everybody brings something to the table as an artist, but if you pick somebody to be sort of the gold standard, it was always Bowie for me.
12-string, do you play?
Yeah. Play all the strings.
Right.
How many strings you got? I'll play the strings.
Heartstrings, do you play?
Oh yes, yeah. But not with the 12-string though. It's too hard to hold down. But yeah, he's always kind of been it for me. And sadly, I never met him. But my only encounter with Bowie was he was living in the same building with Ian Schrager, who lived on the top floor. Bowie had the floor underneath him, and then underneath him was a guy named Steve Paul, who passed away a couple of years ago. But Steve Paul had a club called The Scene in the 60s that was like the
scene.
The scene, the hip scene. That's where everybody went. And he ended up, he was a manager as well. He managed Tim Buckley for a while and Johnny and Edgar Winter and different people through the 70s. But he had his hands in a lot of stuff. But he had this loft floor underneath. So through various circumstances, I was invited to go have dinner at his house with some other friends. And when I showed up, he came in street level past the doorman there, and then you walked to the lobby to get to the elevator bank, and then to the left were the mailboxes. And there were only 4 mailboxes in this little alcove. And my hand to God, as I come up to this elevator and I look over in the mail alcove, and there's Bowie, like trying to pry his junk mail out of one of those little New York, with a hand crammed. He's like, son of a bitch. Valpak coupons and this, and the Crate and Barrel catalog. He says, resident. I'm like, it was really just total mindfuck, because David Bowie doesn't get junk mail. And he does. He doesn't getting his mail, and then he walks to the elevator, and I'm standing there, and the doors open, and we both get in, and I don't even look at him, and I'm thinking, just like interior monologues, don't say anything, don't say anything, don't say anything. And I just know next to me, him looking straight down was, please don't say anything, please don't say anything. This little mail bundle. And that was it. That was my only
Well played.
Yes.
Well played.
With David.
So, gentlemen, scholars, musicians, composers, left of center artists, I'm curious about what you all think about the landscape, the current musical landscape of singles, like how bands put out singles more than they do records these days, if you have an opinion about that.
Yeah, I do. As a person who makes albums and starts the process from the ground up with an album in mind, with that specific format in mind, so as to say that it's never just, I've written a couple of songs. These are songs that are fitting together into this program. I'm thinking about how they're going to be sequenced. What are the arrangement approaches? What's this holistic thought? I mean, all the way down. And if you've been doing this a long time as someone who makes their own album, you're thinking artwork, you're thinking titles, you're thinking all of it ahead of the game. So that takes a whole, different set of I just sort of artistic focus, and that I think is missing in the single release model. And certainly it's valid. I mean, that's where we were before the long player. It was all singles, but that was really just a matter of expediency, because, rock and roll and pop music at the time was considered, pretty disposable. So the idea that you could go into the studio, you go in with Shel Talmy, and you'd make a single in 2 hours, and it was out in the shops at the end of the week. It was just easy, it was quick, it was throwaway, and you could do it, and that was great. But when the album came to be, if that's really where you're working, you think about it in different ways, and you can think more cinematically, you can think novelistically, you can stretch that as far as you want. So to see that kind of falling away, hurts me. I adored albums, I fetishized albums as a kid, just even the physical, the vinyl gatefolds that you could open, it was a whole experience. There were lyrics, there were credits. And if you're a person who does this, that was a real education there. You started to learn all these names and what they did. You might not have known what it meant, I didn't know who the mastering engineer was, but I would see the name and then I'd want to go find out who that was. And to this day, I can tell you everyone who played everything on every record I've ever heard. It's just, it's the way you start to catalog all this. So in many ways, I think the death knell for the album was the shuffle feature in iTunes and with iPods. I think that was the beginning of it all going to hell. Because if you're a person who makes records, you put effort into sequencing. Yeah. Sequencing is huge. Just in the editing of a movie, these people live and die for this. And to just have someone put it on and then it comes in with like the ballad that's halfway through side 2. It's like, no, you can't start from there. You're not going to learn anything. There's an arc. I've made an arc. So it's just, it's tough. And so as people have become more attuned to listening for singles, the attention span has really dropped as well. Of course, that's endemic, to this, screen mindset. No one has time for anything anymore. But even people who are making albums, like I'll go through and look at, the best of lists this year. And of course, I find it, I'm actually at the point now where not only do I not recognize the artist, half the time I don't recognize the genre. But then you look, and I'm seeing that running lengths on some of these albums are down to like 29 minutes. I'm like, wait a minute, that would have been an EP 5 years ago. Nothing, short records are great. 32 minutes I still think is ideal. All first 3 Randy Newman albums, all under 30 minutes, like 28 and a half, 29 minutes. And some of the great albums are there. Same Elvis Costello, first 3 albums, 30, 31 minutes. It's ideal because then you hit it, it's the end, it's like, I gotta hear it again. Boom. Yeah. You do it. Anyway, I'm not sure where we started with this.
Well, how do you, once something becomes lost, it allows for it to be rediscovered, right? So do you think that there's been such an influx of like vintage being and it's, of the time right now that maybe that is becoming a lost art and phasing out. But it leaves room for not only rediscovery, but also innovation and change and...
Sure. It's got to happen. Everything is going to run through its course with how people consume. So we'll say media, because if I call it art, it will sound pretentious. But it is an art, and I think yes, there has been a resurgence in vinyl, but unfortunately, to me, a lot of that feels pretty disingenuous because I think that people are really focusing on the actual plastic media, and I like having this. It's like It's like wearing suspenders around, like you don't know what a belt is. It's like, but it's not about, what does this format represent to the art, that we can use the amount of time allotted here to set up a whole series of dramatic peaks and valleys if we care to do that.
To tell a bigger story.
Tell a bigger story. And then if you are fairly prolific, which I have been, I've essentially endeavored to put a record out every year and a half for the last, how many years. Wow. And as you do that, then that becomes the larger story. Mm-hmm. So that, no particular album tells it all. It's just, I look at them as chapters. Mm-hmm. And that way, I don't get precious about them. It's like every record I'm making is the one after the last one and before the next one. It's going to keep going. And I've always admired artists who could do that. People like Neil Young or Lou Reed, who were just speed demons cranking stuff out. And it gets hard to even keep up with it. But what it does allow you to do is it keeps the music safe from fashion. It keeps it safe from fad. It often is a bulwark against the music getting trapped in a lot of the trappings of production of a particular era. Like if you make a record in '85 and you don't make another one until '92, you heard the differences in what was happening there. They go back to those '80s records, oh my God, what were we thinking when this? So if the art moves too fast, if it's just put it out, put it out, put it out, put it out, you can look at it on a longer timeline. And then it just becomes like this shambling story. It's just like that, which is all that your life as an artist is anyway. You know, that way you're not one guy who wears one outfit and does one thing. It's just a part of every day. It's like eating cereal in the morning.
Yeah, I like that.
So I feel like there's less opportunity for people to express themselves that way, because obviously there's very little in the way of financial support for artist development. I mean, that all went out the window a long time ago. And it's a shame because, as we know, all of the really the pillars of the music industry, all of the legacy artists that built the financial behemoth came out of a system that was built on artist development. I mean, we all know these artists who didn't have a hit until 3 albums in. Bruce Springsteen didn't do anything until 3 albums in. You know, he was out opening for Chicago for 3 albums, thinking that I got to get out of this because it's a drag and nobody's listening. And then Kid Leo starts playing Born to Run. And that was the other thing. You had regional radio that actually broke artists because they weren't all, you know, corporate-owned stations. DJs could pick what they wanted to play.
I think it's that time again, in a sense, and much like what Mark was speaking about earlier about Bowie and Eno saying, well, we'll just produce your record. We don't care. You don't have a label.
There was no deal. Yeah.
We'll do that, and it's time for that sort of patron of the arts to rise up, and other, you know, iconic artists to tip their hat to. And that's what LaunchLeft is about. Is like, hey, this is such a sea of music and art out there. Like, how do we skim the top and find what's really happening without the help of the people we trust? And like, just like we all think, oh, Brian Eno, David Bowie. Like Mark now has that platform, you know, and that's like he's chosen you. So to me, that's like what now could be like. There's all these changes happening, but the more that iconic and big artists who have a bigger microphone use that to tip their hat and say, hey, world, check out this artist, the closer we are to getting back to that kind of development. Because people listen to those who have had success, right? And to those with whom they respect. And so I think it's super important in this climate in music that's what we're pointing at more, and allowing artists to have that freedom to work and do their craft and not have to wait tables and, you know, to have a development deal, so to speak. And that happens just by becoming more by people knowing you exist. Then people can get your records, and then they want to go to your show, and then so it's really like, as hard as it is, with the help of a few like well-known artists, I feel like a lot of people's careers could get that launch, you know?
You know, the three of us are here basically to hand you the steering wheel of pop culture. We need your help.
Drive, baby.
We're putting it in your hands. You can be the bus driver.
All of pop culture I have to drive? Does that include like reality TV and
whatever? You can do whatever you want. You can let
now.
those off wherever you want to let them off.
Do they have to do the ding before I let them off?
You get it all.
Okay. What if it's not, you know, an actual bus stop after hours? Can I let them off?
Yeah.
If I deem it safe?
Well, and we'll give you a stun gun too if you need it. Whatever.
See, now the pot is sweetening with this whole driving the bus of pop culture. Kind of liking the power. I might go mad with power. See, this has been a failed experiment. This is just call it.
It's been a fantastic.
Shut it down.
A fantastic interview. Thank you both so much. And I don't even want to call it an interview. This has been a fantastic conversation.
Agreed.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Can't wait to hear you perform.
All right, let's do it. LA made me fat. I helped. By now I know that every living thing just needs protection from itself. The shell soaps in the bathroom are a touch of class. where cocktails served at 5 begin the day, not end. Exit up at Western, I'll drive. Tell Bob that I'm not busy being born or busy dying, just alive. Some flights leave too early out of Kennedy, and some pricks play that Castro card for years, but not today, cowboy, not today. Just fix your hair and try to stand up straight. We'll be in touch, there's no need to wait. Is there a number I can call for updates on my case? Swollen with lurid grim detail, a memoir of disgrace. Jonah, let me help you, your friend. It's hard to hold your head up once you've spent 3 fucking nights inside a whale. It's hard enough when you live in Los Angeles. It's heavier than hell up on the moon, but not today, cowboy, not today. No, it's not your day, oh, cowboy, not today. No, it's not your day, oh, cowboy, not today. Just fix your hair and try to stand up straight now. We'll be in touch, there's no need to wait. Yes, we'll be in touch, there's no need to wait. There's no need to wait. There's no need.
I'm learning Chinese.
Incredible. You're learning Chinese? That must not be easy.
I'm getting the writing down.
Yeah, it's beautiful actually. I love your postcards. I follow you on Instagram and I love, they're always so good.
The calago, it's kind of like, it's an organ. It's got different organ sounds and settings, and then it's got a keypad like on an accordion. It's a Japanese mutant from the 70s. There weren't that many made of them. So it's going off to get a few little repairs done to it so we can incorporate it into things.
It's beautiful.
LaunchLeft aims to create an intentional space that highlights and empowers all artists for whom radical creativity is not a choice, but a necessity. LaunchLeft begins with music, but its ultimate aim is to launch left-of-center artists in all creative fields.
Everybody.